Well, good evening, and this is Betty Jean Grant, and we are early. Are we early? Are we right on time?
We're a few minutes early, perhaps 1 or 2 minutes.
1 or 2 minutes, but that's good. It's Betty Jean Grant on Red, Black, and Green. Today's edition is November 6th, one day after the general election yesterday. Boy, what a week we've had today. This week. We've had the election Tuesday, and it was very exciting for a lot of people, and we worked all day, and I just am happy that a lot of people who I supported won, and disappointed that somebody didn't win. Somebody I did support it did not win. So what we're going to do today, we're talking about some issues. I'm going to turn it on to Sherry so she can tell you some of the issues that we're going to be talking about on Red, Black, and Green for today.
Good evening, Facebook family. This is Sherry Sherrell. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Red, Black, and Green Show, that community affairs forum where you are king and queen and we are your subject matter hosts and moderators. Today's show is going to be exciting. I think we're going to be talking about, first of all, we're going to be talking about why am I wearing this red, black, and green scarf? Well, because it's cold in here. If it weren't a little bit chilly, then I might not have it on, but I do wear it when I'm outside. And at the red, black, and green scarf. And also, today's show, while I'm being a little bit distracted here, today's show is going to be about the high rate of poverty in the United States and in the city of Buffalo. We're also going to be talking about the incredible election outcomes that happened on yesterday, some disappointments, some surprises, some rejoicing reasons. We're also going to be discussing...
And like you got on green, black, and red, that's why I was trying to say flip the colors around because it looks like it's red, green, black, and red.
Red, black, and green.
I know, but if we flip it around, it looks better.
And green reflects my undertones of the redness in my skin back.
Okay, that's good. Talk to me. I just said, because here I say it's green, black, and red, but it's red, black, and green if you go up to down. Yeah.
So we're going to be discussing some incredible topics. Another feature, we have a new feature. We're working on our technology program, getting a website together, looking for some grant monies, hopefully to get some website up and running, a dedicated website. But also you can call into the Red, Black, and Green Show. Remember, if you know someone or you want to be a guest on the show, you can contact 716-817-0018. You can either call or text. You can also call and text that number if you want a particular subject matter to be discussed on the show, or you can call or text 716-602-5877 if you just want an excuse to talk to the Honorable Betty Jean Grant directly. I call it often myself because I don't need an excuse, but sometimes maybe I should have one. First of all, BJ, Betty Jean, I know you saw the United States Census report of the 115 U.S. cities that have the worst youth rate poverty, and Buffalo was number 4. And I did a little bit of research.
4, I thought it was 3.
Well, but that's 3 overall numbers of persons living in poverty.
Oh, I see.
Buffalo's rate of persons, just individuals living in poverty, is 30 times worse in Buffalo than it is overall in the United States of America.
Okay.
But looking at specifically the youth, part of a family and community empowerment group.
Yes.
I wanted to look at the poverty rates even at a microcosm level of Buffalo's children live in poverty.
You know, I saw 47.2 today, and I said, wait a minute. I said 47.2. I thought it was 30%. So tell me, if it's 30% for Buffalo, then youth is 47.2. I didn't do math so well when I was in high school. So why is there a difference in the numbers between 30% and 47.2%?
Look at it this way. When you look at all of the poverty level in the United States of America, the rate of poverty in Buffalo is 30 times worse than it is overall for the United States of America. So that means there's a disparate amount of poverty in the city of Buffalo. It means most of the people who live in Buffalo are not well-to-do.
Right.
When you look at that 47.2%, that of youth, which is a youth poverty rate, it tells you that almost 50% of the children under the age of 18 who live in the city of Buffalo are poor. That's
Okay,
what
got
that
you
should
now.
tell you.
Okay.
It should tell you that Buffalo is a poor city and that almost half of the children who live here are living at that level in life, of quality of life. And that's more than a shame. It's a challengeable question because with all of the community development block grant monies that Buffalo, I remember 30 years ago when I was studying the question more closely, I was looking at upwards of $30 million that was being sent into the city of Buffalo each and every year from the federal government for community and neighborhood development programming to happen. Now that's whether it was going to be Head Start or whether it was going to be monies to incentivize minority and small business development. The problem was then what the problem is now. It is not enough money. The problem then is also another problem that's manifested now is the management. Now, I know people have not been caught off guard, or maybe they were, I shouldn't say, maybe they were, by the FBI raiding City Hall. Did you see that on the news?
Yeah, I did. We'll get into that, and I was kind of surprised. But before we get into that aspect of it, and reason why they probably raiding, because poverty money, if I'm not mistaken, comes from CDBG money, which comes from HUD,
Yes.
Housing Urban Development,
Yes.
under the Ben Carson. So we did have that raid today in City Hall. Before we get back to that, let's go back to when I came to Buffalo in 1970. I think the poverty level overall was 27%. It rose up to 28%, and so me, by not being focused every year on the level going up and down, I was absolutely flabbergasted when I found out that it's at 30%. Because I know that there are anti-poverty programs in Buffalo. There's money that's coming to address poverty and blight. The reason that we have CDBG, Community Development Block Grant money, is because of the poverty-stricken neighborhoods and the blight of these dilapidated buildings and abandoned buildings. Now, that's been addressed over a period of years, but the poverty level, after we have, and I think when I was a common council member, it was 18.9% coming in specific to address poverty and blight, not the CAO, not the Head Start, not the education, but the economic redevelopment of neighborhoods and low-income individual getting money to rehab their houses and whatever. So over a period of years, the poverty level has increased, yet and still the community development block grant money has decreased. And so what are we looking forward to? Because you study this, I know a lot. What can we do to kind of have more money coming in and less poverty in Buffalo?
It starts with leadership. First of all, the poverty level is supposed to be directly tied to the amount of community development block grant monies that are sent to the city. The money is sent in direct response to the poverty problem. So we should see an increase in the amount of CDBG monies that the city of Buffalo receives. If we do not see that, we need to question the leadership. It is the leadership's job to advocate for the needs of the persons and for deficiencies to be redressed and addressed. And if they're not doing that, when you said, before we skip ahead, because I want to talk about the outcome of the elections, I want to look at this poverty issue amongst the youth a little bit closer. But Buffalo, amongst 115 cities, was the 4th worst youth poverty level. And the United States Census Bureau says that of the 58,617 young persons under the age of 18 that live in the city of Buffalo, 27,678 are living below the federal poverty line. Now, remind you, this is the city of good neighbors, and the city of good neighbors is enjoying a so-called renaissance that's happening, that the Census Bureau also has said thousands of persons are being left out of. And clearly some of those thousands of persons are youth under the age of 18.
Yes.
The only cities that fared just as bad or worse than Buffalo when it comes to youth poverty are Detroit, Rochester, and Cleveland.
Okay. Now how late is that information? Because I know Rochester was in there last year.
The year of 2017.
Okay, but just remember, we just had, at that time, Rochester was higher than Buffalo poverty level, right? So Rochester's not in the top 3. So that means Buffalo has slipped.
Rochester has risen, Buffalo has slipped.
Oh, okay. I just want to be clear that we're number 3, not Rochester. We were number 4. We have been demoted to number 3. I wouldn't call that promotion under any circumstance to be up like that. So what can we do other than, because we can't change our leadership. The election was yesterday. No pun intended. Okay.
What an outcome that was yesterday. You know what I wanted to speak on, because one of our guests here on the Red, Black, and Green we had recently was one of the Fillmore District candidates. We had tried to reach out to all of the Fillmore District candidates, but only one was able to respond in time enough to make time in his schedule to come on the show, and that was Mr. Raymond Brinson. Now, Mr. Brinson is a lifelong Democrat, but was on the conservative line. Now, what I was looking for was hopefully a positive outcome for him. Obviously, it would have been a win.
Right.
But what we got instead, I saw, was a different type of victory. I saw a situation that I've not seen before.
Okay, we finished. Let's go to stick to poverty. We're going to go to that because I want to have said some things on that election. And I'm very disappointed that the Democrats, who knew better, was painting him as a Republican.
Who was doing that, though? Which Democrats were doing that? That sounds like that came directly from the party.
Well,
that Democrats who are disgusted.
Can we say something?
With local politics.
Right. It could have come from a higher source. It could have come from Democrats who want to win by any means, and it was slander. You know, it's kind of hard to win an election because he was astute enough when he did not get the Democratic endorsement, when he was told, unwisely told to dump his petitions because he had got him out of the wrong election district. And the reason why he was not on the Democratic line is because he got 1,200 signatures in the dead of winter in February. And some of those EDs, election district that he went to, was in the Lovejoy district, they were in the Maston district, or they were in the Ellicott district. He had got to be in the Fillmore district in order to circulate petitions. And instead of weeding out and maybe crossing off lines off sheets or throwing away sheets, someone say that, you know what, your petitions is tainted, throw away the whole batch.
And who did that was a saboteur.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Who should ever name this on this show, but I know who it was. And so he threw those out, and they had to go out there again in February and get some more. He wound up getting, I think, little over 400, knowing that he needed 375. He didn't feel at that time that he'd have enough to qualify, so he gave up his right to run on the Democratic line, which he had every full right to do so because he is and is a Democrat. He sought the conservative line. And I don't see anything wrong with that because we have almost every judge I've helped over a period of 20 years who ran, they have run on the Democratic line to be a Democrat. They sought the Republican endorsement, and sometimes they cross-endorsed, they got the Republican endorsement. But when the Republican had their own candidates to run, they would have separate Democratic, vie for the Democratic line. They would skip the Republican because they had their own candidates, and then they would go to the conservative line, and they would go to the independence line. So what Mr. Brunson did was no different from almost every judge, every Democratic judge who has run, who has sought other lines to get elected, and those are major party lines. And so he is not a conservative because he's on a conservative line. And those Republicans who were cross-endorsed by the Democratic Party over a period of years, or those Democrats who were endorsed by the Republican Party, they never changed their affiliation. They still remain. So, but because we are so unlearned and have not been taught, and we have not bothered to learn the political process and what the political different labor means, we were led to believe that this young man who was very intelligent, very smart, was not a Democrat. He was a Democrat yesterday, a Democrat Sunday, and he's a Democrat today. And so what they did, I believe, was as bad as what they're accusing other people of doing, is smearing people and putting unfair labels on them. But so that's the nature of politics. It has happened to me, and so I'm not surprised, but I'm really disappointed.
So there was a level of demonization that
Absolutely.
was going on. You know what I found? I saw a different kind of victory, and I'm going to take a guess, and I'm going out there a little bit on a limb, but I think that if there was that kind of a smearing going on that was coming from either higher up in the echelons of the Democrat establishment here in the county of Erie, or that was coming from the opposition. I can't see, with the community being as flabbergasted and as confounded and as unhappy as we are with the political situation, with politics in general, I can't see it being in the interest of anyone, the typical John and Joe, John Q and Jane Q public, having it in their interest to smear Mr. Brinson in that way. There would be nothing to gain.
Right.
So it had to come from someone with a vested stakeholder interest in trying to distance him from the community's vote. And so the other thing that I saw, though, the interesting thing, I think, is I've waited a very long time to see the community mobilize, make some effort to mobilize, to illustrate, even if they weren't conscious of doing it, but in illustration of voting off of that Democrat line, of that major party line. Mr. Brinson garnered just a little bit under 600 votes. And it's very obvious that there had to be Democrats that gave him those 600 votes. There was a large number of Democrats that gave him those votes. I was very happy to see that. So even in the midst of perhaps seeming to have not won the war, there was a battle that was captured, and there was battleground that was gained. Now, as the community voted and did so painlessly, no one broke out into a sweat or started bleeding when they came off that Democrat line. You know, no one had got a stake through the heart. People need to see that happening as a community. We need to see that happening. We need to see that it is the Democrats who are beholding to us and not the other way around. They are fortunate to gain our vote regardless of what their party are, whether they are Republicans, whether they are Democrat, whether they are working families, whether they are conservatives, whether they are taxpayers. They are fortunate to gain our vote. They are not due our vote unless they give us a candidate that is worthy of our vote. And I saw that Mr. Brinson's and his candidacy, I thought I saw and believe I saw a worthy candidate that all, just they say, just for the good, if not for the what do they call it when they say, if not the benefit of the doubt, but if not for whatever, there go I. What does that expression go?
Oh, wow, my mind just went blank. Therefore, but for the grace of God, go
But
I.
for the grace of God, praise God. How could I not be able to think of that? That tells you what politics will do, though. It can keep them separate, because sometimes one kind of dampens the other sometimes. But for the grace of God, had he been on that Democrat line, I saw a champion for the community.
Absolutely.
And I saw a young man that is the answer to prayers that I know I've had over the 30 years that I've been active in community affairs. I have long wanted to see a young African-American male, young African-American female get involved in the struggle.
And beauty of that, he was born and raised and still is in the Fillmore District. So he spent his whole 25 years in the Fillmore District. He's Buffalo born and bred and Fillmore District raised. Another thing I saw too, that maybe it might be a blessing that he did not file for the Democratic primary. And the reason why, because we had some outstanding candidates. We had Tina Sanders, who came in, I think she came in third. We had Gerhard Yaslow, or Yaslow Gerhard, I forgot.
Yaskov?
Yeah, which name comes first. He was on the line, he came in second. Mitch Nowakowski, of course, who won the primary, came in first. And we had Pharaoh Page, who came in fifth. We had candidates who was knocked off, like Dijon Hall. It was sixth. And I think at the point in time that had he persevered and was on a Democratic Party and did not seek the Conservative Party line, he might have split that vote farther between, I'll call them ethnic neighborhood candidates, for lack of a better word, and he might not would have won the primary. And so we wouldn't have known the dynamic, I would say just outstanding person, young man, model citizen that we've seen in Mr. Brinson. So maybe God knew in his grace that maybe he was saving the best for a taste, so we know what to look forward to in the future, because I definitely see his ability to mobilize. He said 80% of his vote came from the younger generation. I hope that's true because I've seen in his campaign headquarters more young men and women
I saw that as
that
well.
I have seen involved in the political process in Buffalo since the early days of grassroots
And it was a beautiful thing to see.
in the mid 1980s.
Yes.
Absolutely beautiful. And they were phone banking. They were driving people to the polls. They were voting. They were telling people how to vote. They were texting people information how to vote. So I saw the future of Buffalo sitting in a room where he had his.
About the community's affairs. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to see young people getting involved in the political process. Another topic that we're going to have today is about community empowerment now.
Okay, but before the political, what do you think about the races yesterday, and what do you think about the candidates we had in the primary? Because I know, and people don't understand, well, why is she supporting Raymond Branson? Well, Raymond Branson, I know him personally, and I chose to support him because I couldn't vote for him, but I got a store in the Fillmore district, and he's the only person who's running the general election, who came by the store, who asked me for advice. You know, it started out me giving him advice, and I wound up, giving him a whole lot of advice. But Tina Sanders, a friend of mine, she's a women warriors. She was in the race for the Fillmore district. Pharaoh Page, who is my husband's relative, he was in the district of Fillmore. So I had, yes. Sharon's husband, sister is Pharaoh Page's mother.
My God.
Brenda Welch is Pharaoh Page's mother. So
Sharon's
my husband's sister's husband's
brother.
Wait a minute, my husband. Let me just say again. My husband's sister. Husband's
mother
is Pharaoh's mom.
Oh, so they're brothers.
Well, they're cousin. Okay. Fact. Let me just simply, Pharaoh Page is my husband's great nephew. How about that? That's that. Because there's Aunt Susan, Aunt Miss Mary Sally. That's hard to follow. Small world. And so here I'm with relatives and kinfolks, and then friend. And I said, well, what am I going to do with that? But I had promised Tina, and people don't understand. I promised Tina in 2018 in April that I was going to support her. In fact, no, let me just go back. 2017, when I ran for the mayor's race, I promised her I'd support her because she had made her mind up then she wanted to run. So she was no Johnny Congeal. She was going to run all the time. So she was eliminating the primary, and then we go to the Lovejoy district, and Esther Smothers, we are women warriors. She was in that race, and she, didn't persevere in the primary, but as a friend, and she was in the race, and plus she worked for me as well. And then even in the general election, it's kind of hard for me, and so I kind of focus on Raymond because Carrier Horn is a woman warrior, and she was in the University District, and she was running against the Honorable April Baskin. So I did all my politics, not in University District, because I did not want to be in that race at all. I was never any doubt in my mind that April would not win, but I could not see myself campaigning against Carrier Horn because of the long history of this woman who fought the police department and lost her pension and put her life on the line. So there was no way that I was going to campaign against Carrier Horn. So I busied myself across East Ferry Street in the Fillmore district.
That topic that you just were on takes me right into the community empowerment, because that was the aspect of community empowerment I wanted to discuss, and I think our viewers are interested in. Did the community support the community candidates? That slate of candidates that came out of last year, and you're saying it started before last year.
Right. Well, so those want to call in, you can call 817-0018, or you can comment on Facebook the question she asked, and I'm going to let her ask that question again. And I'm going to answer the question, did the community support the candidate that the community came from?
Yes.
Well, if you live in Allentown and you're a part of the LGBT community, yes, you absolutely did. Okay. You support Mitch Nowakowski, who's a member of the LGBT community. you support him 100%. Raymond and I had a conversation. He said, Miss Grant, if I got 5 votes out of the Allentown area, I'll be surprised. Because everybody told me, that's Mitch, Mitch my man, Mitch my man. And so then if you go to the Muslim community and you ask, did that community support their candidate? I would say absolutely 100%. Because Muhammad Alam turned in 286 votes in early voting, and he turned in more votes than the winner last night, Mitch Nowakowski. And so did the Muslim community support their Muslim candidate of their heritage and ethnicity? Yes, they did. Now let's go to the other communities. You have the European community near the Old Forest Ward. Did they support Mitch Nowakowski, who is of European descent?
Did they support Lynn Dixon and Mark Poland?
Yes, they did. They absolutely did. Yes, they did. So who's left? African American. It used to be the majority of the Fillmore district about 15 years ago. We might be less now because of immigration and people leaving and, growing up. Did the African American community, particularly those, I'm going to qualify, that knew the stakes, who knew that other people support their people from their individual neighborhood and community, did they support the African American community?
I saw a quote that
Candidate?
said only 5% of people
No, they
voted.
did not. They did not support. They didn't support by not coming to vote, and they support because of promises or where they worked or what they were offered. Now, I have missed out on a whole lot of things. I won't say miss out. I have not been granted a lot of jobs. I know because I have been offered, but because I would not play that political game of selling my community out, I'm just going to say this, I have not benefited. So you have to stay true to, and I commend the LGBT community for standing behind Mitch Nowakowski, and I commend the Muslim community for standing behind their candidate. Because if you're running somebody for office and he comes from your community and you want to be a part of that political process that determines what happens in those Muslim neighborhoods, those LGBT neighborhoods, those African American neighborhoods, you're going to feel comfortable, I'm going to say it, about somebody who looks like you, who was born and raised around you, who know the issue of your neighborhood.
But why doesn't that
because
work
they came
for
for
African-American people, though? Why doesn't that work for us? The number of times that I, on election day, saw someone and we were trying to get people to get rides to the polls, we were trying to give away rides to the polls, the number of times that I said to a man walking down the street, a woman standing at the bus stop, have you voted today yet, sir? Have you voted today yet, ma'am? Nah. How in the 21st century, a community of a lot of complainers, well, a lot of us, we do complain, we're not happy with the way things are, yet we don't exercise the power of the vote, and that is where the leadership comes from, that makes the decisions, that determine the conditions that we are either happy or pleased with. Well, how do you make the connection?
Well, I'm going to say what I believe. When I ran for the Senate for the first time, 2012. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but when I ran for the Senate race in 2012, and I was not bounced off, but I was cheated. I'm going to say cheated because they left 425 votes uncounted.
You
cheated.
Really won that race.
Yeah. So, well, I was one, but I was not anointed, and so I still ran in the general election, and I ran as a protest because I knew that election had been stolen from my candidacy, and so I ran as a write-in. And people said, well, Betty, don't get started. People never do anything or write in. You can't do this, can't get your message out. And I said, well, why not? People can read, right?
Exactly.
And so in September, October, yes. In October, less than 3 weeks, because they finally, October 24th, said that they got certified the ballots and Mr. Kennedy had won the election. I went out there and I did a mail-in campaign. I sent out mailers. I went to the Challenger. I went on Facebook. I went on every TV show, every radio show, and I let people know that I was a write-in candidate. I showed them how to do it, and so I got 16,000 votes as a write-in candidate. So I know people can support, but one thing between 2012 and now is that there's been people who have been elected and they campaigned against those who were in office in 2010, 2012, 2014, and they promised to do things differently. They promised they're going to be another kind of candidate. They promised they're going to take care of the people's concern. that didn't happen, and people are so mad. They find out now that somebody who said, I'm going to be accessible to you, I'm going to make sure I care about your concerns, and I will respond to you in a timely fashion. They go to City Hall, they leave a message, they never get a call back. Or they go to City Hall after spending their gas and going upstairs and going to the office, and they get told, well, you have to send an email in. And we have to read the email. And we have to see if you can be coming here for an appointment. Now, you're already there. Yeah, it is. You're already there. Why not just simply say, okay, the council member or the mayor or whoever you're trying to see, the legislator, or assembly person saying, I'm not leaving anybody out, is not in the office. Do you want to leave a message? I know that can happen because we did this. We had message book when I was a council member and legislator and school board member, and people came. I wouldn't turn that person away and say, I'm sorry, you're here, but you can't leave a message. You can't get a schedule for an appointment. You got to go home. If you have a computer, send in a request for a meeting, and we'll read it and we'll respond back to you via email. That turns people off. They said that that's inaccessible, so people say that politics doesn't work for them because the people who they are having office are not responding to their individual needs.
And it is a self-fulfilling prophecy because as people become disenchanted with their leaders, they become disenfranchised from politics because they even take themselves out of the loop by refusing to vote, and that enables for the wrong type of candidate to get elected, and then they keep that revolving door going of voter suppression. You see how all that works toward voter suppression?
Right, absolutely.
When people don't vote, they are inflicting a self-imposed voter suppression. There are lawsuits happening all over the country, and there are revolutions happening all over the world because people are being denied an opportunity to exercise their democratic franchise to elect and participate in the political process. Only in America, only in this highly industrialized Western civilization society do you find people voluntarily separating themselves from the right to vote and to participate in the political process. It is an epidemic proportion in the African American community. How do you explain that? I think one way is people have their attention fixed on, number one, they're just trying to survive.
Right.
It's so hard to survive. So you see how institutional and systemic racism can work towards voter suppression, and how it can work towards voter disenfranchisement, and how it can work towards a self-fulfilling cycle of spiritual and economic and social and political poverty. So it really truly matters where it really truly begins, and that is with leadership. We simply can't afford to allow ourselves to suffer at a certain level of suffering. We can't wallow in it.
Right.
We have to be activists, and all of us have to be activists. We are going to have leaders because, frankly, in any movement, somebody's got to lead and somebody's got to follow.
Absolutely.
In order for there to be a movement. But we have all got to have about our own households, about our own lives, and then we've also got to have I am my brother's keeper outlook and world perspective and vantage.
Right, and a very important thing too, leaders can't choose their followers. Their followers choose their leader.
Exactly.
Because if you have no followers, then you're not a leader.
Exactly.
And another thing I think what's happening too is that people have been disappointed so much by elected official, and they think that nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to change because nothing has changed. They still have the same potholes, and I hope people saw my video I did at the Town Garden Plaza. Potholes been there for over 3 years. That is inexcusable to have potholes. And people say, well, nothing can happen because it's private property. Excuse me, if I had 10 potholes in front of my sidewalk, in front of my house, and I didn't fill them in, and the city inspector came, guess who would get a letter that said fill this up, or get a fine and a penalty, or the city would fill them up and they would bill me for the cost of it. So to say that it's not a city issue because it's not a city property is really an excuse to not do the civic responsibility. And I can't imagine any inspector going to the Town Garden Plaza and looking at those potholes, not sending a letter to the company, and the company is in New York City. I know that they're going to tear it down, and in fact, if you look at it, you see the boarded windows, you see debris, you see trash, potholes, you see asbestos, not asbestos, because I don't know what asbestos look like. You see mold, and you see crumbling pillars and cornerstones. So are they allowing that plaza to deteriorate to the point that it has to be raised and torn down?
That is what systemic
And
and institutional racism does.
yes, and are they not fixing those apartments? Because I think the people have a moratorium or something not to pay any rent until they're fixed. So if there is an account that the city of Buffalo is holding for the company that owns the Town Garden Plaza and those Town Gardens home, then they could take the money out of that and get that potholes repaired, because saying it's not my responsibility is not really fair to the resident who are expected to shop at that plaza and who lives in that general area.
And that pothole for me is a metaphor for poor leadership. Now, can I ask you a question? How come off of Transit Road, where the Eastern Hills Mall is in the town of Amherst, how come I wouldn't see potholes like that in the parking lot?
Oh, you ain't got to go
of
that
the
far,
Eastern Hills
Sherry.
Mall?
You don't have to go that far. You can go to Cheektowaga. You can go right around the corner of Tonawanda. You can go to Amherst. You can go to Lackawanna. You can go anywhere except the city of Buffalo and not see that level of potholes.
So it is an attitude, it is a demeanor towards the community. So that really, the condition of that plaza is an insult to that community there.
Absolutely.
And that community is a predominantly African American community. One of the things that I hear, and I listen, I got my ear to the ground in the community, and one of the things that I hear is people are fed up. They are tired, but they are also weary. They don't know where to start. They're asking the question, when we talk amongst ourselves, which we do a lot, and not just on Facebook, but on the Facebook, certainly you can see the conversations, the threads. Where do we start? We all know there's a problem. There are many problems. We all know some solutions. There are many solutions, possible approaches, possible solutions. Where do we start? I'll tell you one idea I had and I don't know how far I'm going to go with this, or if it's going to be well received or widely received. I don't know yet. But I thought of having a community learn-in. You know how during the civil rights era they used to have community sit-ins?
Yes, absolutely.
I thought about a community learn-in. And what I thought about was during the era of Martin Luther King Jr.'s heyday, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s heyday, that era when he had the ear of the White House, the Oval Office, and President Johnson had convened a commission of very learned scholars, men and women, whose job it was to study Black America and to study it in depth and to come up with a blueprint, to come up with a plan of solutions and possible approaches that were going to target mainstream society from Black society. And I thought of doing it by taking the Kerner Commission report.
That's what I was about to say. What about the Kerner Commission? You discussed it last week.
That is the report.
That's great.
I thought of taking the Kerner Commission. It is a 496-page report, and having a community learn-in where we get together, and I don't know if I'm going to do it as a warrior, or if we're a Women Warriors member, or if I'm going to do it as just as a private citizen.
No, we're going to do it with Women Warriors member.
And
because we have a lot of warriors, and we can, have everybody involved, and so we can have a dynamic program.
And what I thought to do was to bring that 496-page report and to page by page, paragraph by paragraph, column by column, line by line, study what those scholars, those Ivy League educated scholars said was the recipe to undo the damage that the Black community was exhibiting. And I thought if the community would partner, that we could get, a handful, maybe dozens of persons who would come in and receive an answer to the question, where do we start? Let's start where you are supposed to start, which is at the beginning. The Kerner Commission report was a beginning. What happened? In the middle of that report having been issued, all of a sudden, President Johnson did an about-face, despite what he told the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. he was going to do. When that commission was issued, Reverend Dr. King's conversation, his focus changed from integration to, if we come back to Washington, we're not just going to come there so that you can see some type of march. We're coming to get our check. his conversation turned to that. There was an about face on the part of the president, and all of a sudden, that report was put on the shelf.
So that's when I'm sorry, not Kennedy. Dr. King became more militant. Also,
Yes.
the Poor People's March, or what he was planning, the Poor People's, what was it? The Poor People's March. I think he was planning.
You're right. You're absolutely
Yes,
right.
absolutely.
You're absolutely right.
And he was
his
involved with
focus changed.
abolition, went to abolition, and telling them too. And so
Absolutely.
he moved from racism
Absolutely.
to classism and economic deprivation.
Absolutely. And Dr. King saw the solution to economic deprivation. He saw finances. He said America has dug itself, and I'm paraphrasing, dug itself into a pit that the only way out of it is through dollars. It's going to cost America something. Some of the other solutions that we needed did not cost America anything. He said, but to solve this problem that is really confronting and distancing Black Americans from their human, civil, and basic rights, is going to cost America something. So in that Kerner Commission, there are all kinds of remedies and solutions and approaches. And I thought of having a community learn in, and let's get together and let's answer for ourselves the question, where do we start? Let's start at the beginning of page 1 of that report, and let's go through it.
Right.
And then at the end, let's each of us do a report ourselves as individuals of our own solutions. And let's come together from that with a plan that we ask the community to ratify, and that we take as our political platform to our leaders. Let them try to have another election cycle season without having forums, without having town halls, because this is where we would meet them with that plan, and we would ask, and we would have the language of scholars to use to address these men and women that are running for office, so that we don't have to come out verbatim and ask, what are you going to do for us moving forward? But that be very much the item that is on our plate and the action item that we want to see on their agenda.
So how soon do you think we can get this together? Because I know that we put it on this Facebook page, and I think somebody might say, okay, it's a good idea. I just thought about it yesterday. I'm going to go ahead and do it. So we're going to take ownership of this. And I want to say, too, there's an Erie County anti-poverty panel that was in panel, I think, about a couple of years ago. You know anything about it? And what are they doing to alleviate poverty and homelessness in Buffalo?
Listen, I'm a very humble person. I know that I don't know it all. So what I tend to do is read a lot. In my reading, I have not come across this anti-poverty panel. So you being closer to the political forum than I am, know more about it than I do. But I would love to see a report from that commission on the Black community, an unapologetic report, not minority, not language like minority community,
right,
but Black community, the way that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and President Johnson in the Kerner Commission approached the same problem. Because here we are 54 years later, and we still have the same problems, and the problems have gotten worse. The number of homicides, the police brutality, the youth unemployment, the high illiteracy rate, the high mortality rates, the lack of affordable housing, the lack of federal contracts that's set aside for Black and minority contractors and business persons, the lack of Black-owned businesses at commercial strips on the neighborhood level throughout cities across the United States of America. None of this is a surprise. The same problems we're having now were problems that people were concerned about developing then. And what's happened is history has manifested that they were correct to be concerned. They were so correct to be concerned, they did what we are so difficult to be moved and motivated to do. They came up with a plan.
Right. Now, what it's going to take, you know, I hate to say armchair activists, but we got a lot of armchair activists in Buffalo. You know, we sit here, we call each other, we complain, we on Facebook complaining, and then we go home and go to bed and we forget about it until another issue comes up that we have to address, and we complain and stuff. What it's going to take us from getting from complaining on Facebook to actually sitting in a room or a hall or whatever it needs to be sitting at and get a plan together to improve the lives of our children, especially our children. And what can we do to move this forward, to go from just idle chatter and talking to sitting here, getting ideas, getting input, writing them down, flushing them out, researching them, and presenting to those who we have elected. We have people from our community in almost every position. We had people in the assembly. We have representation, not for the community, but Tim Kennedy has done well on a lot of issues he has for the community, and I'm very impressed. If I didn't want to be in his seat, I'm kind of glad he's in his seat because he's making sure that certain parts of Buffalo is going to be included in the budget. So I'm not going to be too hard on him. But what can we do to have these elected officials from the county, the county council, the mayor, and even those in anti-poverty commissions, those who are in organizations like Buffalo Urban League, CAO, who have been charged and who have been paid very handsomely to address the issue of homelessness and poverty and our educational needs. What can we do to get them to participate and to say, okay, time out for this. We're sick of this idle chatter, idle complaining. Here is the plan we have, and we're going to present it to somebody. If we get a plan together and give it to Donald Trump, he acts on it, then it's going to be acted on, okay? So we just can't sit here and keep complaining because our children are going to school hungry. Our children are not being educated as adequately as they should. Our children are not graduating at the level that they should. They're not going to college, even though college is free and everybody is storming into Buffalo to get this free education. If you maintain, I think, a 3.3 or 3.2 average, you can go to college for 4 years for free. But yet and still, our community, our African-American students and Latino students are not utilizing this free education. What's free than free? So what can we do to get people saying there are opportunities out there, there are resources out there, and if they're being spent, if poor people money come to Buffalo and is being spent to give rich developer money to rebuild or rehab warehouses or vacant apartment buildings, or schoolhouses, and our senior citizens don't have a roof on their house and their steps needs to be fixed, and money has been designated and allocated for them, but it's not going to them because it's being waylaid into giving people tax abatement where they don't pay property taxes for 12 years. What can we do to motivate this community saying resources are coming in, but they're not being spent the place that they should be spent and who they should be spent on?
I have an idea. I think the community is motivated. I think that it takes motivation in order to develop or to summon the energy to complain. The community is motivated.
Okay.
I think that if you think back to during the Civil Rights era, the height of it, during the 1960s, every single person that every one of us knew was not out marching. There were some of us who were waiting for the revolution to be televised. Amen?
Amen.
To be honest, we want to see somebody else doing it.
Yes.
And people right now are so jaded that until they see a plan, until they see the plan being discussed, ratified, until they see the plan being voted on and adopted, until they see their favorite celebrity person touting it, they're still going to sit by the television, they're still going to sit by the radio, and thank God they do, because that's how a movement is built. Somebody's going to lead, somebody's are going to lead, somebody's are going to follow, somebody's are going to watch. And that's just the way it's going to be. So that's why I say what I say and I do what I do, because I'm very conscious right now of my mortality. I've grown 30 years older from that fill-in-the-blank age young woman that I was when I first sat down at the knee of a mentor and began to learn about the difference between community economic development.
You can call his name.
The Reverend Charlie Fisher, and began to learn what community economic development is and how it is different from just feeding people lines. As some politicians, and some career politicians are wont to do. So what I'm very conscious of is these are my twilight years of being an activist. I know I look young and I feel young. I am young, and my mother is young, thank God, and she looks young, and I hope she feels young. But none of us is going to live forever. Within my lifetime, I want to see the community come up with a plan that it works, that it commits to working toward. And the only way that I can ensure that that has a chance of happening is if I take the lead and become one of the leaders, and in doing so, the community joining in and other leaders emerging, and we co-steer this thing where we need it to go, so that as this generation, we can say that the baton was passed and we ran with it.
Absolutely. I want to say, hey, Catherine Lovelight. That's my cousin from Brighton, Tennessee. That's Aunt Ruby's daughter. Hey, Catherine, she's watching.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, it's great. Okay, so what time is it? It's got a little more time. We do. Then we got a little more time
We
to
just
talk.
have a few more minutes. It's 8:22.
Oh wow, this is great. This time goes fast. So you can talk about well, I'm gonna say what they said. The raid on City Hall, and how do you feel to see those bundles and boxes?
It's not funny. I'm laughing because I never in my young life perspective worldview would I have hoped that my City Hall would be raided by the Fed. It looked like Elliot Ness was going up in there, and the only thing I can say, and I say it seriously, is it's about time. What took them so long? What I've learned about the Community Development Block Grant and its mishandling and its mismanagement is that crime is not cheap. And why there are not people behind bars for mishandling and mismanaging the CDBG yet, I don't know. And I hope that the FBI and the Housing and Urban Development Agency, I hope they're not going to have...
Internal Revenue Services too.
And the Internal Revenue Service is definitely there. I hope they're not going to be mincing words. I hope that they're honest, and I hope that they're candid about what damage they found and what...
And also, if they didn't find any, to make that clear too. So if there's been no crime committed, then I think people should not be associated with causing a crime. But I think when you get a federal judge to give you the permission and authority to come to raid or to take boxes away, I think that they have more information than we know they had. So I'm hoping that justice prevail.
I'm hoping that information will be forthcoming. I love to read. But so that is how I feel about that. But other than that, if I could touch base on anything else, I would say that I want to just share something that is on the community's heart that I've been able to gauge, and that is the recent uptick and surge in the number of crimes against young children.
Yes.
This has got to end. People are at their wits' end asking the question, is there something going on? I know I asked the question too. Is something going on in certain parts of the country where people don't know how to not try to harm their own or somebody else's child? And in the Delta region, where it seems like every other week there's an Amber Alert, what is going on is adults are warring against children. Children cannot defend themselves even well against each other, let alone having to defend themselves. Can you imagine being 1, 2, 3 years old trying to fight a 40, 50, 60, 30, 20, or 18-year-old that's trying to assault you? It's not fair. Children deserve the right to live their lives to the fullest and for the longest amount of time, free of pain. Life is painful, but it ought to be free of pain that people deliberately try to inflict upon one another, and certainly upon children. So I'm hoping that the laws become stricter. I'm hoping the police become more diligent.
Okay, let's talk about this police. And I was thinking about this as you're talking about children that being harmed and stuff. And Facebook, beware. If you want to hear this, turn your volume down because I'm going to be a little bit graphic today. I read about a police officer who was caught by his fellow officer in the process of raping a young 7-month-old child. A police officer. And it must not have been the first time, because when they did investigation and they found out that he was photographing it, had his camera set up, and he was sending it to a member of the district attorney of that particular county.
My God.
Now I'm saying, how sick it can it be when two law enforcement officers are committing a crime? One I know definitely is on duty and committing a crime against a helpless individual who they're supposed to be and have been sworn to protect. So if it's that bad and society has gone out of board, what can we do to instill the moral that used to be there, that do the right thing or treat others the way you want to be treated? What can we do as a community? Because I think the killing is coming from people not empathizing, or putting themselves in that person's position. They're not saying, if there was my family member was killed, I would feel like this, so I don't like feeling like this, so I'm not going to harm anybody else. How can we kind of re-grasp or get that moral connection back that the African American community have always held? And we go to church and we pray and preach and on our knees more than any race of people, but yet and still, our community has the highest level of homicide. Look at the Bangladesh community. When the last time you heard somebody got killed in the Bangladesh community?
Well, I will tell you
Look,
this
let me just
because
finish.
I
Let me
read
finish.
their media.
Yeah.
And they have crimes over there that will horrify you.
Are they murdering
Against
each other?
children. They're raping children.
Bangladesh. I'm talking about Buffalo on Fillmore District.
Here in Buffalo?
Yes, in Buffalo. Look at the Muslim community. When the last time you heard about a Muslim teenager being shot and killed?
I heard of a Muslim young boy being shot by non-Muslims.
Okay, that's
being hanged, right?
right. That's one. That is not normal.
Yeah.
We get almost a killing a month, or maybe 2 or 3 a month, and we've done this for a period, I say, of at least 35, 40 years. So and in the 50s when I'm from, that didn't happen. So what happened between drugs in 1968, the cocaine that was inundated in our communities, in our neighborhoods.
Divorce also happened.
Divorce
Breakdown of the family.
at a higher level of single parent house. So I don't want to put anything on female who's raising kids by themselves, because a lot of people, including Jesse Jackson, was raised by a single parent. A lot of your civil rights activists were raised by single parents. So it always has been single parents raising their children. But now it seems to be less people raising, and they're not giving kids that moral background and compass to say, do unto others as you want people to do unto you. Instead of doing that, sure, they're calling these kids MF and SOBs and everything else. And selling them. Yeah, for sex, for drugs. And so how can we, and I'm being rhetorical, how can we as a community regain this moral compass that African Americans have always had, even during slavery?
Well, the one thing is that the community does not live in isolation of other communities. The other thing is that our community has had a multi-pronged struggle. The same problems that plague greater society plague our community, but at the same time, we're also fighting institutional and systemic racism. At the same time we're fighting that, we're fighting black-on-black crime, and a travesty, which is a travesty in and of itself. So the only thing that we can do, it would seem to be, we have to, in the spirit of Sankofa, is we have to look back at what we had going on as a community when times were not as just desperately awful, terrible, and challenging as they are right now. What was going on? And one thing we did have, we had community schools.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We had schools that were right in the heart of the neighborhood. Kids could walk to school. Parents of some other child's parents could watch another parent's child walk to school, even if that parent was a single parent and had to go to work. What else did we have going on? We had a lot of products that were being made in America, including the automobile industry. So we had access to jobs. So what else did we have going on? Well, we had a very vibrant human rights movement that was going on, the civil rights movement, which also had a black power and black love component to it.
Right.
What else was going on? Well, I don't know if there was less hypocrisy in church than there is these days, but we had probably a higher rate of people that did go and participate in religious services. Another thing we had a higher rate of marriage. Do you know, for the first time in history, most people are not married. Most people in the world are not married. People whom are married are in the minority. So we had higher rate of marriage. We had lower rates of divorce. What else did we have then? We had more compassion. We had more people donating to charity. We had less children going into foster care.
Yes, we did, and we had more black teachers teaching our children.
And we had fewer young people in jail, and maybe even fewer people in jail. And we
didn't have the drugs. That was important.
We didn't have the drugs, and isn't that very, 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 very important? We also had a different kind of demeanor between men and women. We didn't have this standoff that we have now, where it almost seems like women and men are competing against each other. And we didn't used to have that. So even though there was the glass ceiling, the man used to hold the door open for the woman when he saw her approaching the office building.
Right. And now, if a man's, not all men, but it's gotten to the bad point now that if a man sees a lady and he's interested, and he approached her to have a conversation, and she rebuffed him because she's not interested, or she walked away, she almost had to fight for her life because he gets so upset, he starts cussing out, and women have been attacked because they refuse to acknowledge a man when he wants to talk to them.
So that warped sense of entitlement is also attached to extremely direly low self-esteem.
Absolutely.
So,
anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that it's 8:33 and we're 3 minutes over. So the only thing I would say is community. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest or have a subject matter you have in mind for the Red, Black, and Green Show, please feel free to call or text 716-817-0018. You can also go on the Honorable Betty Jean Grant's Facebook page. You can send her an instant message there, or if you'd like to speak with her, you can phone 716-602-5877 or send an email to TheRedBlackAndGreenShow@gmail.com.
And I guess for next week, if it doesn't change, it'll be Lionel Bladden. He wanted to talk about Marcus Garvey, the UNIA, the University Negro Improvement Association, formed by Mr. Garvey, the red, black, and green flag that was created by Mr. Garvey, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and he'll be on the show next week. And I want to say I'm glad Drea Deneur is watching, because Drea Deneur is going to be honored this coming Friday evening at the Buffalo Niagara Convention Center by the Western New York Peace Center. She's getting an award for the choir. I forgot the name of the choir, but they sing at almost every women's rally. She's been honored along with Valentino Dixon. They're going to get the 2 awards from the Western New York Peace Organization Friday, 5:30 to 8 at the Buffalo Niagara Convention Center. If you need tickets, you can call me, Betty Jean Grant, at 602-5877, and I'll be on the radio show tomorrow at 7:30 to 8 a.m. 7:30 to 8 a.m. Kerry Saunders, who has a program called A Senior Moment, he interviewed me, and I'll be there in a tape. You can't call in, but I'll be there with a tape interview. Very interesting.
You'll also be on the
7:30 to 8 a.m. And then at 8 a.m., I'll be sitting in the same studio, be a part of the WUFO, a community hour that starts at 8 a.m., and I'm going to be there to bring a little bit of diversity and bring a little fire to the station.
So you mean you will be seeing the Honorable George Alexander and the Honorable Willie L. Warren?
Yes, I will.
And the Honorable Warren K. Galloway?
Yes, I will. And we put our blessing to the Honorable Reverend Page, because he's a little under the weather.
Yes.
So I'll be co-hosting tomorrow, and Saturday morning, if things go well. I might be doing that on a regular basis. So, on that note, those who are watching, thank you for watching. Please share it. If you got something out of this, I hope you did. If you did not, I can imagine why you didn't, because we talk about a lot of subjects.
You must have fallen asleep at some point.
And we have to really do better about economic development, providing jobs for our individual, education, make sure our children have access and benefit from the Say Yes program, making sure that there's minority participation, and making sure that we get the money that HUD and CDBG has in store for us to put roofs on our senior homes, repair the sidewalks, fix their steps, and do everything the money was intended, and help to reduce homelessness, and help to decrease homicides. No, not decrease, eliminate homicides in Buffalo. Because a child does not have to die by a gun violence. He does not have to die. There's not predestiny. we can prevent that gun deaths if we get these guns out of this community and put the right frame of mind in our children. They respect other people and treat people the way that you want to be treated. On a note,
Amen.
Sherry,
Amen. Power to the people. Stay informed.
red, black, and green. See you next
Red,
week.
black, and green.
Bye.
I'll see you.